So if the whole point of text game is to get dates, then I should probably teach you how to do dates successfully. So here are my pointers on how to have your dates actually lead to sex, ideally, right? At the very least, have them lead to second dates and etc. But ideally, you do want to be leading to sex. I'll give you a little bit of my own personal history, which is at first when I started doing dates, I was absolutely terrible at them. I didn't know what I was doing. And then I started getting better and better, and eventually I started getting second dates, and then I started having sex on second and third dates. As I've gotten better and better and better, what's actually happened is I actually have more sex on dates in general, right? Like a higher percentage of girls I go on date with, I end up sleeping with. And also, it's really shifted towards the first date. So funny enough, it was like at a certain point, I would get a lot of second dates, but I wasn't getting a lot of sex on first dates, and maybe I'd be sleeping with like 60% of girls I go on dates with or something like that. Over time, I got to the point where I was sleeping with like 90+% of girls I was going on dates with. But the funny thing is, any girl that wasn't sleeping with me on the first date would like never see me on a second date. And there are things that I've learned to do over time, and I'll talk about them a little bit, where if you slow it down and you specifically know that it's not going to go on our first date, you can make the second date happen. So you can change your strategy for that. But I really do think that escalation on a date is key. Look, if the girl's taken time out of her day and she's put aside that you are her priority for that evening, that's a pretty big commitment on her part. Add to that, ideally she's come to you, we'll talk about that. And you know, she clearly is bought in, she clearly likes you. Also, she's all by herself. There's no friends there to judge her, no one to like think that she's slutty. I mean, most of the typical obstacles to having sex are gone, right? That's the beauty of a date. Also, you guys have kind of agreed that you like each other. So if you set things up and play it right, you should be having sex on a large portion of your dates over time. If at first you're just, you're new to dating and just getting a second date's a big deal, just getting a kiss is a big deal, we can work with that as well. But understand the ultimate goal is dates should lead to sex. Understand that. So with that said, that tells us a few things about what's important on a date. First thing is logistics matter, okay? You want to meet the girl near your place, if at all possible. If the place that you're meeting the girl is a walking distance to your place, it's gonna be very, very easy, relatively, to get her back to your place, to get her to an intimate setting, to get her where something physical can actually happen. If it's near her place, that's probably the second best option. Way, way, way second best. Is like first best, second best, way down here. But next to or near her place is viable, especially if you happen to know that she lives alone or those kind of things. That can be a workable option. The worst place to meet and what you should definitely avoid is meeting somewhere in the middle. And girls will suggest this kind of stuff all the time. They're like, oh yeah, we're kind of far away, why don't we meet in the middle? That is terrible, because at the end of the date, there's gonna be that moment where you're going one direction, she's going the other direction, and there's no plausible reason for you to go the same way. Because look, if you had a good time, why wouldn't you just see her for a second date and do something then, right? So there's no logical reason for you to go home with her or her to go home with you. And for the girl, if there's no logical reason, then that if she goes with you, that means she's a slut, right? It means that she wanted it to happen, or she was too easy or something like that. So you want to avoid those situations, all right? Near your house is the best by a tremendous amount, or your apartment, or whatever your place. Near her place is okay in some circumstances. In the middle is to be avoided. The only time I would take a date in the middle is if it's a situation where it's like the only possible way I can meet up with her, and also like I'm leaving town and it's just like I need to build that bridge and go for a future date. If it's a date where I'm looking to actually have sex on the date, which is the vast majority of my dates, I don't want to meet in the middle. In fact, I'll turn down some dates where it's meet in the middle to try and schedule for a better time when she's actually free or whatever. Okay, so that's very, very important. Next thing within the scope that dates should lead to sex is I want a good time window. I don't want a time window where the girl's meeting me at 7 and then she has some other plan at 8, like meeting with friends at 8. I don't want to be multitasked, and I want time to get to know the girl and time to let the interaction build, okay? My philosophy in game in general, especially on dates, is if the girl's gonna hang out with me for like 4 or 5 hours, we're for sure having sex. If she gets that sample of my personality, gets comfortable with me, I'm gonna talk about it in a second, but the slow, gradual escalation that I'm gonna do. If she's just subjected to that experience, she's very, very, very likely to sleep with me. But the problem is, if we start down that path of things getting closer and closer to sex for an hour or two, and then we cut it, now all of a sudden she's leaving and she's like, oh shit, next time I see him, we're definitely gonna have sex, and she'll be actually really nervous about seeing me again. So I wanna make sure I have a proper time window. That's the other thing when I'm setting dates. I wanna do dates early enough at work. So for example, if the date's on a weekday, and I know she works at like 9 a.m., I don't want to set like an 11 o'clock date because she's going to have to get up early in the morning. And by the time she's making that do I stay over or do I get up decision, you've only been hanging out for like an hour, so she's not fully bought in. If instead you met her at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., and by the time it's getting to 11 or 12, you've had that 4 or 5 hours, she's really into you, she's pretty well like down to have sex with you, then at that point, you have a lot more leverage and things can go a lot better. So I want to make sure I have a good time window. With that said, one of my favorite times to do dates actually is early afternoon on the weekends. Right? Early afternoon on a Saturday is amazing. Early afternoon on a Sunday is amazing. You have all day, you have this experience of like getting to know each other, day fades into night, it's this wonderful like romantic sort of journey. So I really, really like those as well. But in any case, make sure that you have good logistics and make sure that you have a proper time window. It's super, super, super critical for if you do want to get laid. All right? Next thing on the date, you need to think about the level of escalation. If you're not super comfortable escalating, my suggestion is go to a place where you can sit next to the girl and it makes sense to get physical. This is a big thing for me. When I first started dating, for my first 9 months, I had such a hard time getting physical and a really, really hard time kissing the girl, right? And so what I would do at that time is I would always sit next to the girl because by doing it that way, I could touch the girl, it was natural, I could make out with the girl on the date, all those kind of things. Funny thing happened at a certain point when I got really good at dating. So I was getting like very few results on dates, a lot of second and third dates. Then I started doing that. I started actually sleeping with girls on the first date a lot. And then at a certain point, I started escalating too much on the date. And it actually started turning girls off. I was sleeping with fewer girls and I was starting to really, really not get any second and third dates. And I realized that I was kind of pushing it too far. It's kind of a funny thing. It's like a lot of guys, maybe they'll get into, like say a martial art, they'll get into it to learn to fight. And then they find once they learn it, they don't have to fight anymore because people can just sense they're not to be messed with. I kind of got that way with escalation, where I got so good at escalating and so comfortable with escalating that like the girl could tell that I was the type of guy that would escalate. And so all the sexual tension from escalation was already built, even if I sat across the table from her and even if I barely ever touched her. And so I could do the same things with just eye contact and vibe that I could do physically. So I got to the point where I actually stopped escalating as much until I get the girl back to my place. But I definitely do make sure there's sexual tension, make sure that it's clearly man to woman, make sure that I'm flirting. I'll never let it get boring, but I don't get nearly as physical as I used to. However, if you're at all uncomfortable with physicality, you need to get through that hurdle. So it's kind of transition, right? If you're not physical enough, you need to get more physical. If you're getting really physical and you're really comfortable, keep doing it until your results start getting worse. But if at any point they start getting worse, then drop it a bit and use other channels of communication, right? As long as the girl knows you're there as a sexual person, she's hanging out with you, that's pretty much achieving the purpose of physicality. So you don't need to be super, super, super physical. Next thing you need to know on a date. A date means that you and she agreed that you like each other, okay? Now what that means is kind of beautiful. It means that she has just as much invested as you do. Okay, in fact, if anything, maybe she has more. Because as much as you don't want to have a bad date, because it's kind of annoying, it's a waste of your time, she really doesn't want to have a bad date because she probably told all her friends about it, they're going to ask her about it, or if she's like single-ish or single and has a bad date, she's like, oh my God, am I undateable? Am I unworthy? Am I ever going to find love? So this is a big deal for her. And so as much as you don't want to have a bad date, multiply it by 5 or 10, and that's how much she doesn't want to have a bad date. And so the beauty of that is that if the date isn't going the greatest, if it's not super entertaining or like super high energy and woo-woo amazing, she's gonna do a lot of the work for you. So I actually have a particular strategy for dates. Instead of trying to go in and like make an amazing first impression and like knock her socks off right at the start, I actually wanna go super, super, super chill. And this is related to kind of how women experience emotions. Women don't necessarily experience their subjective experience of emotions isn't necessarily how much that emotional chemical is in their body, it's what the change in that chemical is. So if things start out really, really good and they start to get worse, even if they're still really good, the girl will feel it as a negative. She'll feel as though this date is going badly now and she'll be uncomfortable and she won't like it. On the other hand, if the date starts out a little bit like lame or even awkward, and then it gets gradually better, she's gonna feel as though you're getting to know each other and the vibe is building and you're growing chemistry, and she notices that the change is positive. She notices the longer she's around you, the better she feels. And so what I do on dates, rather than try and like be amazing at the start of the date, I just show up. And I don't do anything weird or creepy or uncool, and I'm not like silent and like non-participatory, but I don't do a lot to continue driving the conversation forward. And I don't do a lot to entertain her at all. And what I actually want to have happen is she gets to the point where she's like, oh shit, this is a little awkward. And so she goes, so where are you from? So what do you do? And now she's essentially gaming me, right? The date has flipped and she's taken on the role of the guy who's getting to know the girl, as opposed to I'm now in the role of the girl who's being courted and being asked all these questions. And the other beautiful thing about being asked the questions is I know what questions I'm gonna get. I know that she's gonna ask me, where are you from? What do you do? Do you have any brothers or sisters? What kind of music do you like? All these like random array of questions. And because I know them, because I've seen them before, it's like if someone gave you the answers for the test ahead of time, you know the answers, right? It's very, very, very easy to play that way. And also, because she's asking you the questions, you can say things that are really good about yourself and it's not bragging, okay? If you go in and you tell her all the cool things about you, you're bragging, you're tryhard. If you sit back and she asks you the questions and you then divulge, you know, especially even if you're like hesitant or like bashful about some of your accomplishments as you're forced to divulge, it looks like you weren't trying to be impressive at all. It's just everything about you so impressive you just couldn't help it. Okay, so that's the vibe you really want to go with. So for all those reasons, I like to go a little bit like low-key at the start of the day, and I really don't try hard at all at the start. I'm normal, I'm cool, I talk, but I'm not trying for anything in terms of pushing it physically or romantically. I'm not gonna like invest a lot. I'm gonna try and get her to invest more than I am at any given time. So a lot of my dates kind of like they start off looking a little bit lame, but they lead to sex. So it's kind of what you want. So now you're on the date, you're talking, she's investing, it's going back and forth, you're saying good things about yourself. You still need to, that's great, she thinks you're cool. But there's a difference between the guy that's cool and the guy that sleeps with her. And that difference is escalation and logistics, right? So it's, do you escalate the conversation to a man-to-woman interaction? And then also, do you actually get her to a place where sex can happen? So let's talk about escalation first. First of all, escalation, in my mind, is not just physical. Okay, there are 4 ways to escalate. You can escalate physically, meaning you start touching her more, she starts touching you more, which is great. But actually, in a public place, I don't do it a lot. I do it a little bit sparingly nowadays. Although, again, if you're uncomfortable with it, do it a lot until you become comfortable with it. Secondly, you have logistical escalation, moving her from place to place, and then eventually to your place. And it is important to move to other places first, because it just gets her comfortable moving around with you and it makes it seem like there's less of an agenda and more of an adventure. But moving her around, especially moving her around in places that are getting closer to a place you can have sex, is a very good form of escalation, maybe the best even. And then finally, you have verbal escalation, and I really break that into 2 categories. So one type of verbal escalation is talking about more and more sexual topics. So if you're talking about the weather, then that's not very sexual. If you're talking about like her hopes and dreams, that's a little more intimate, but it's still not sexual. If you start talking about weird sexual experiences you've had, that's clearly very, very sexual. So there's this escalation of topics. And within that, topics related to sex are really good that are non-sexual. For example, drugs and alcohol are related to sex, but non-sexual. Tattoos related to sex, piercings, that kind of stuff. Partying, taking risks, adventures, travel. All these kind of things, these exploratory kind of experiential things, are related to sex but not sex. They're great gateways to sex. So you can change the conversational topic to more sexual, and that's a great sort of implicit way to escalate things. And the final way that you can escalate, the 4th one, which is also verbal, is the nature of the conversation between you and her. So if you're talking about small talk, that's not about you and her at all. If you're talking about yourself, that's about you and her a little bit, but it's not really like super relevant to her and it's not like going deep. If you talk about her, that's more relevant to her and a little more risky in general. But where you eventually want to go is to we, talking about you and her together, using the word we or us or that kind of stuff. And that's where you're cementing this bond that you two are together. And she starts responding we and us as well. Now you know that you've created an item there. All right, so the escalation is small talk, I to you to we. So that's the 4th kind of escalation. So again, it's physical, logistical, verbal topic, and then verbal sort of intimacy of pronouns, verbal of intimacy between you and her. So you want to be escalating all of those, I would say gradually and continually throughout the date. Whenever things are going well, you want to be very slowly and patiently escalating on one of those sort of channels. Okay. Now, I do say slowly and patiently, and here's why. Going slowly, you'll get there actually relatively fast. Right? If you're escalating just a little bit and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, but you're constantly escalating, you will actually get to sex within a period of a few hours pretty quickly. However, the thing that will really set you back is when you hear the word no. When you get resistance to your escalation, she says no, she says stop, she starts giving objections. So if you try and go too fast and hit an objection, that time you tried to save, you'll end up like magnifying it, multiplying it by 10 and wasting it. Okay, so I often say 5 minutes at the start will save you 2 hours at the end. Okay, so be patient. Gradually escalating, but extremely, extremely, extremely patient. Understand that if what you're looking for is a relationship or an ongoing thing with the girl, you're gonna have to spend a lot of time with her and get to know her anyway. You may as well do it now, okay? So take your time, try and enjoy the process and the experience rather than just thinking about the outcome. Now definitely do be moving it towards the outcome, but be patient and enjoy the experience. If you're too outcome directed, she's not gonna enjoy that. The girls like sex too, and girls want sex, but they want sex to be part of an experience, right? So if you're like trying to be like, hey, can we cut the experience and just get to the sex part? That's gonna be very much a turnoff for girls. So be patient, okay? Again, moving this direction very, very slowly gets you there very fast. Moving here and getting a huge setback, that's what gets you there slowly. So on whatever channel you're escalating, you wanna be doing it very, very slowly. And specifically with physical escalation, what I always wanna do is, if this is 0 and this is 100% of what I could get away with, I wanna be right around like 80%, okay? I don't wanna be at 100% because that's when I'm risking the no, but I'm 80% and she's comfortable with it, she's having a good time. The range of, and she even wonders, why is he not escalating that last 20%? It makes her very comfortable, and what I could get away with expands very quickly, and then I'm right there. I'm at 80% now, but I'm at what was 100% a minute ago. And that's where I always want to be. I want to be escalating really fast in general overall, but not to the maximum of what I could get away with, okay? My sort of master stroke move that I really love in terms of physical escalation is to escalate a little bit and then pull back. They used to call it 2 steps forward, 1 step back in the pickup community. What I like to do is I like to get them escalating on me more than I'm escalating on them physically. So for example, one of my favorite moves to do is I'll go to kiss the girl, and you know how like if you kiss a girl, it's like little light kiss, and then there's that moment where you guys just go animal on each other. What I like to do a lot of times, I'll go light kiss, and right when I can sense she's about to jump in and dive into it, I'll actually pull away, and she's like, like kissing air. And now she's chasing you, right? So I'll do that same thing with other forms of escalation. Now, if you're pretty uncomfortable with escalation, I'd say start off with light things first. Like for example, just like touching her arm, touching her shoulder is a good start. It's not the best as you're more advanced, but it works and it gets you comfortable with that physicality. Hugs are good at that point. What I like to do personally, my personal physical escalation moves tend to be a lot more intimate. And so my stuff is like hugging to a bit, cuddling, hand holding. I do a lot of stuff with like the hair, the head, the neck. So like maybe, for example, if she has like a hair in her face, I'll take the opportunity to brush it out of her face and I'll see how she responds. If she goes like this, I know she's not on for anything more. If she seems cool with it, then a lot of times I'll run it out of the face, and then maybe I'll like give a little tug of the hair, or I'll just run it there and just know that it's kind of on. And so I like to do that kind of stuff because it is very intimate and it's very like sensual, but it's also sexual. So it's right on that bridge of like love and lust. So I really, really like those types of moves. The other one that I like to do a lot isn't necessarily a physical move, but it's like a spatial proximity move. So what I like to do is I like to just lean in just gradually and see how she responds. Like lean in as, not as though I'm gonna go for a kiss, but just like getting a little more intimate, and see if she pulls away, she's obviously not ready for anything like a kiss. If she like is pretty good with it, then she's maybe ready to be kissed. And at that point, I have a lot of techniques I can do for the kiss. One is like look from her eyes to her lips and see how she reacts. Another one is go in and tell her a secret, and then as you come back from the secret, pull back across her face and see how she reacts. I usually wouldn't go for a kiss there, but if she lets you get to like, you know, pretty close to lip, you know it's pretty down and you can go for a kiss later. So there's all these little sort of test moves that you can do. And the idea is that with all these moves, you're getting more intimate, but you're not being so obvious and you're never being forceful, right? And again, you're always going 80% of what you can get away with rather than 100, because that level of what you can get away with is expanding rapidly. So what was 100 5 minutes ago will be 80 very soon, okay? So that's a bit on physical escalation and escalation in general. In terms of logistics and getting her home, I think it's very, very important to do that kind of the right way. Okay, so a couple points on that. Point number one is you want to be careful about how you talk about it. If you say things like my place, obviously, heaven forbid, don't say let's go have sex, stuff like that. That's very blatant, very obvious, and if she says yes to that, she'll feel slutty. So there are some obvious things to avoid, like don't say my place, don't say have sex, don't say get naked, don't say make out, don't talk about those things. Instead, might be like, I know a quieter place where we can hang out and just relax. Or, I think it'd be fun to cuddle with you, but we should take things really slowly, so not yet. That kind of a thing where it's not overtly sexual, and if anything, you're even like putting up the restriction rather than her doing it. And that's a really, really big thing I do, called either covering the exits or giving the excuse first, is whatever thing she's gonna say, like I'm not that kind of girl, I have to get up early in the morning, I think we should take it slow, all those kind of things, I'll actually say something along those lines first, so that if the excuse ever does come up, I was the one who brought it up, and I'm like, oh yeah, I said that an hour ago, it's totally fine, right? It also sets up this frame where she's chasing me, and girls aren't used to being disqualified. Girls are used to guys being like, hey, can I please have sex? A guy that is willing to take his time, a guy that like throws up a few obstacles and barriers is a strange commodity for a girl to run into, and she tends to get very intrigued by it, and she tends to chase it pretty hard. So do those kind of things. The other thing I want to talk about, so we talked about a little bit about what not to say and do. What do you say and do? Well, when you talk about actually taking a girl home, I think there's really 4 stages. The 4 stages are seed, frame, qualify, and lead. Okay, now seed basically means throw out ideas for things that you could do together. Find out if she likes movies. Find out if she likes a particular show on Netflix. Find out if she's into amazing views. Find out if she likes hot tubs. Anything and everything that you have back at your place that could be, find out if she likes the same kind of music as you. Find out if she's into this weird board game that you play. Whatever it is, find out a reason that you could bring her back. And what you'll do is you'll just kind of throw those things in the conversation, talk about how you like them, and you see what one she jumps on. If you're talking about this weird esoteric passion you have, and she's like, wow, that's really cool, I'm into that too. Well, if you happen to have stuff related to that back at your house, that's a great excuse to bring her there, all right? So what you're doing is you're seeding these various reasons of why you could go back, and you see what she latches onto. Some of them she won't latch onto, and you just continue the conversation. Some of them she will latch onto, and those become your ways of getting her back. And ideally, you should maybe have a few different ones so that if one doesn't work, you have backups, okay? So you wanna find out what's gonna be your reason. The next part is framing it. What perspective, I guess, are you creating around taking her home, right? Is it framed in a way that like you're gonna take her home and use her for sex and then throw her out? That's not palatable to most girls. Some girls that will be palatable, and that's just what they're looking for. But most girls, they want to believe that there's something special there. They want to believe they're not being used. They want to believe it's for the experience, that kind of stuff. So you want to be very, very careful about how you frame it, what perspective you put around her coming back with you. And the key thing is this: it needs to be a win for her. If going back and having sex with you is a win for you and a loss for her, it's gonna be very, very hard to get her to do it. But if it's a win for you, if it's a win for her, it's gonna be a lot easier, right? So if she views you as massively high value and she doesn't know she can have you and she wants to win you over, that's a win for her. If she feels like you have this amazing connection and it's really just a special interaction, you guys are lucky to have found each other, it's a win for her. If the way that she feels physically is so amazing that she thinks the sex is just going to be some of the best sex she's ever had, it's a win for her. But you need to come up with a frame or a perspective where it actually is a win for her and not a loss, okay? Because no girl wants to go back and be like, yeah, I got used for sex, it lasted a couple minutes and kind of sucked, and then he kicked me out afterwards and never called me. Well, maybe some really low self-esteem girl wants that, but for the most part, like, that's not what girls are looking for, okay? So frame it in such a way that it's a win for her. Very, very critical. Next one, qualify, is a bit of a bonus, but it's very, very, very useful in general. And qualifying in general, making her feel as though she earned you, is massively important, okay? That's of critical importance in general. So getting her to tell you cool things about herself and acknowledging them, really, really good. Even like being a little bit difficult and like being like, hey, do you have this? Because I only date girls with this. That kind of stuff can be good to a point even, especially if she then tries to tell you that she does have that kind of stuff. But being discerning and having standards can be very, very good. So qualifying her in general is good. But what I'm talking about here is actually qualifying her with respect to going home with you, okay? So for example, you'd be like, hey, I want to show you this record collection, but wait, actually, I don't know, you seem cool, but you're a little weird. I'm not so sure. Are you a trustworthy person? She's like, no, yeah, I'm totally trustworthy. I'm such a good person, da 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 da. When she starts proving herself for the right to go back to your place, now going back to framing, how much is going back to your place a win? She earned it. She won the privilege. And she now feels as though most girls wouldn't be invited back, but she was, right? So with that qualification, it's a luxury. It's not necessary in order to get the girl back, but if you can make it happen, it's going to make everything happen so much easier. It's going to get her chasing. It's going to make sure that like when you do get her back to your place, it's much more likely you're actually going to have sex with her, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that qualification is massive. And then finally, when you get to the very end, when it's time to take her home, when you've done those steps, seed, frame, qualify, you have to lead. You'll be like, okay, cool. Yeah, okay, I'm cool with it. Let's go. And you just get up and you lead. Even like start walking sometimes and just let her follow, right? Do it with some amount of like certainty and assuredness, right? As though you expect it to happen. The girl will very rarely lead you. You have to be the one to actually make it happen. And once you've done all that groundwork, there's no reason to think that she wouldn't go with you. And to be fair, like leading is actually a very attractive quality for girls. They like a guy who does lead, all right? So once you've done your groundwork, decide and go with it, make a strong move, and take them to the place where you need to go.